Recording.
Welcome in, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It is a rainy and cold day here in Birmingham. I wonder if it is where you are. This is the sort of cold that I always think of as bone cold, where it gets in your bones and you can't get warm. It's not that cold terribly outside, it's just cold. And it's such a typical March for Alabama, for those of you who are joining from our state. And I know all of you who are listening are experiencing probably the same weather and climate as we are. So I hope that you are warm and dry and bundled up and ready to continue our series on the hospice doula. This is part 2. This is East meets West, and in it we will discuss ways in which age-old, centuries-old practice, which is really what we would consider a developing world way of practicing death and dying in hospice, is sort of being now laying over modern hospice in some of the ways that it attempts to provide spiritual and other encouragement to folks on hospice. So as we're continuing to let people in, we will begin doing a little housekeeping. So if you're here, you know that you can't join here after 12:20. We are accredited by the State Board of Nursing and also by the State Board of Social Work for the state of Alabama. And they require that you be in attendance for at least 40 of the 55 minutes of the CE. This is a live CE. It is not a recorded CEU. So it counts as a live CEU, and that's because we do evaluations at the end of the CEU to make certain that you participated and hopefully to gain insight from you about what was good, what was bad, how we can be better, other topics you'd like to see. So, these are the things that we want to see from you, hopefully, when you do your evaluations today. They're due by 5. So please don't, let it lapse too long before you get in. Paper certificates are issued today, as of now, until we get our nursing log on. But we issue paper certificates for both nurses and social workers. These are digital, of course, and I send those out this evening after you complete the evaluations. The evaluations are key. I cannot send you a certificate if you do not do the evaluation. You will need to remember a participation code word or password to get into the survey. And we'll tell you that later, about 40 minutes into the presentation, again, to make sure that everyone is getting the full benefit. Now, I'll go ahead for those of you on the phone and let you know the address, the SurveyMonkey address that you will need to go to on the conclusion of this presentation to do your survey. And that address is https:// www.surveymonkey.com/lowercase r/8, all uppercase, FQ9XZJ. So that's the Survey a Monkey address for afterwards. Those of you who are viewing the screen and doing the Zoom, please make note of that. And I'm sure somebody will, as they often do, post it for us. And Charity, hello to you. And I hope all of you will use the chat room to introduce yourselves to one another, not necessarily to me. I'm happy to meet you, though. But to share ideas. I hope it becomes over time a place that you feel is a safe place to communicate with one another about things that are important to you, whether those are things, needs that you have, or whatever it might be. Your phones are muted, so you'll need to use the chat room to communicate and ask questions. If somehow you fall off of the Zoom call, and need to get back in, hopefully I will remember your name from letting you in, but if not, shoot me a text. My number is 205-482-8759. Shoot me a text to 205-8. I just forgot my own number. Text my number, 482-8759, and I'll let you back in, or give me a call, whatever, or email me, sbarnes@carepatrol.com. I have 3 partners who help me: Dixie Tyler, who's in Huntsville and Decatur, Jennifer Redding in Florence, and Tracy Talley in Scottsboro and Huntsville as well. Hoping to add teammates in Birmingham, Montgomery, and Tuscaloosa. So if you're aware of anyone looking, please let me know. Letting people in still. We've got people still joining. No, you didn't miss the code word, Ingrid. The code word we give about 40 minutes into the presentation. And in this way, we hope that we can prove, if we're ever audited by the state boards, we can prove that you were here because the code word was 40 minutes or so into the presentation, meaning you had to, thank you, Charity, for putting that up there, meaning, Ingrid, that you had to have been in the presentation for 40 minutes, if that makes sense. So no, we don't give the code word yet, but we will give it, and do listen for it, and you will need it. So let's get started. It's about 7 after already, my goodness. And we want to get into our topic today, which is hospice doula. This is the second part of our series. We did the first part last Thursday, I believe it was. And this is anyone not familiar with the word doula? It's Greek, and it means servant, and it actually means female servant. And you might most often have heard, instead of the word doula, you might know the word midwife. Same thing. And you also might hear birth doula to differentiate between a death doula, which is a hospice doula. And a doula is someone who's a guide and a servant, someone who shepherds you through, in a way, like a Sherpa. Alice, if you will email me, my email is sbarnes@carepatrol.com, and I'll shoot one out to you. Sometimes some of the emails bounce when we send these out, and I don't know if it's because people key in the wrong letter or if it's something on my end, but I can tell you that if technology is involved, it probably is likely my mistake. But Alice, I'll get that to you. Thank you for pointing that out. So we're going to learn the role of the hospice doula and how it incorporates Eastern practice, even though it is a Western and really a scientific way of doing hospice. And because the doula is so, and the Hospice Zen project, which we also discussed last week, are so influenced by Buddhism, we want to just give a basic, rundown of what Buddhism is, and then what all of this culminates in is finding some way to free the mind of emotional pain and the body of physical pain, and meditation is the driver of that, at least in with the folks that we've discussed thus far. And so we're going to learn to meditate today. I hope that's encouraging for you. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll proceed. So I just want to go back. Anyone who wasn't here with us last Thursday when we discussed the first part in the series of the Hospice Doula, when we focused mainly on the Western practice of hospice. Today we're focusing on the Eastern practice, and by Eastern I mean Eastern world, in Western world, of course, not Southeast. But so what we talked about then was the advent of hospice. Now, hospice had invented in various forms, but there was a particular person in 1948 named Cicely Saunders who was caring for a man who was dying of cancer. He had survived the ghettos of Warsaw. He was Jewish, but he was dying. She fell in love with him and realized that the spirit was strong at death, whereas the body was weak, but the spirit remained strong. And she felt that the spirit ought to be ministered to as much as the body. So her idea of hospice incorporated a spiritual component, as well as a social work component, as well as the traditional, what we think of as a medical component of hospice, which is pain alleviation. Although we can do that in non-traditional ways, and hospice does approach that like meditation. So anyway, Cicely Saunders had formed the first hospice in London in 1967. Dr. Florence Wald, who was the dean of Yale's nursing school, formed the first hospice in the United States in 1974. She asked two pediatricians and the local minister to join her, but Connecticut Hospice remains really one of the flag bearers, the standard bearers of hospice in the US. She, interestingly enough, had taken a sabbatical from Yale in 1968 and spent 6 months with Cicely Saunders at St. Christopher's Hospice in London. And it is on this basis that she formed the Connecticut Hospice. Now, about the same time as all of this was happening, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, also a doctor, had written a book called On Death and Dying, and she interviewed in that book 500 dying people. This was a blockbuster at the time, and it turned the United States onto conversations around death and dying in ways that had never been before, so much so that she was invited to speak to the Senate in 1972 regarding the right to choose how one dies and where one dies and if one dies. And in 1982, Congress then, who moved very quickly, as you can see, 8 years later, established a bill to fund hospice as a Medicare benefit. Now, all sorts of changes have happened to hospice in the time since then. In terms of, if you work in hospice, but in terms of the regulations, the payment structure, et cetera, lots of change, and also changes in the way that hospice is rendered. So 1987, Dr. B.J. Miller forms the Zen Hospice Project. This is born of his adherence to Buddhism, and not as a Buddhist, he's a Christian, but to Buddha's principles in medicine, and particularly as applied to hospice, and particularly as is applied to dying and pain alleviation. And you might ask, well, of course, he was on the staff at UC San Francisco, so it shouldn't be too odd to imagine why he would be a Buddhist. He's on the West, he's in California, they're all Buddhists. But that's not it. He was an athlete in high school and went to college, I believe to Princeton on scholarship, and was between classes and walking or horsing around at the railway station nearby the campus, jumped up on a railing, grabbed the wire above him, and his legs blew off below the knee and his arm above the elbow. And at 18, there he was. So he needed something to cure his spiritual crisis, as well as the immense pain from all the operations that followed. And so he landed on meditation. I think this is a seminal point in the history of hospice in the US, because I do think that the Zen Hospice Project will not necessarily be incorporated, but some of the practices of it will be incorporated in our own approach to hospice, one of those being the hospice doula, which is the creation of Henry Fusco Weiss. He was a man in his 50s who went back to get a master's in social work because he wanted to make a difference. His first job was in hospice, and he continually heard from, at first, from patients or from families of folks who had passed on hospice about their experience. And for so many of them, it was not a good experience because maybe at the last minute they had a hospitalization that they did not wish to have, or some other incident, or they died en route to the hospital, or whatever their wishes were, those wishes weren't somehow met. And so he decided to create the doula position, the guide position, the servant position, the midwife position, to guide people through hospice and making their wishes known and advocating for them and educating them around how to support their dying loved one. And it's one of these things that draws me to this topic, because what my business, Care Patrol, does is the same thing. We educate, we advise, we advocate. We try and help the family to make informed decisions, try and help them understand what the future looks like. And this is what the doula does. And it's probably what many of you do actually in your own practice, I would expect. So that is the Western approach to hospice, incorporating the Eastern notion of Buddhism. And, you know, we've talked a little bit about Miller and Fusco Weiss, but the things that you should know is Dr. B.J. Miller has a TED Talk. Do you know what TED Talks are? TED Talks, I think TED stands for technology, maybe education and diversity, I think is what it stands for. But anyway, many renowned folks and not so renowned folks give TED Talks, and they're very informative, and I would encourage you to find them if you've not listened to them before. But in his TED Talk, Dr. B.J. Miller said that he wanted to redefine death, that palliative care should contain more spirituality and allow patients spiritually to prepare for death. This means comfort and spirituality and support and acceptance of the death and acceptance of the reality. The Survey Monkey is not working yet, Joe. It's not turned on, but I will fix it. Thank you for pointing that out. And the thing about Henry Fusco Weiss, what he had said, and this is important because we're going to come back to this. I have also learned from the dying that there really isn't any death, just transition. And my hope is I can get as many people as possible to see this truth. And the focus is on the sacred space in the last days. And it's interesting. I think whenever you have a transitional event, it is sacred. Birth is sacred. Death is sacred. It is a sacred space in which these things occur. And I think to honor that in a practice that makes note of that in a spiritually comforting way makes perfect sense. So Buddhism has influenced Henry Fusco Weiss. It has influenced B.J. Miller and you know, billions of other souls throughout history. And let's just very quickly, so it makes a little more sense, hopefully, talk about what Buddhism is. And this is very quick, so mind you, I won't get deep, but we'll talk about Buddhism, what it is, so you can understand the transitional piece to it and the West and hospice practice. So I think when we, in the West, think about Buddhism, we think maybe men in orange robes, you know, putting chalk drawings on the ground and chanting Om Patti Om Patti Om. But that's not really Buddhism. The aim of the Buddha was simply to show us how to live without turmoil. And he prescribed that in order for us to do this, we needed to adapt to a middle way. This is the way between excessive indulgence and self-denial. Now, at the time that the Buddha walked the earth, there was a sect in India where he lived called the Jainists. And these folks were in part what he was trying to say, we don't need to do this. These folks would not kill anything, not even a bug crawling on them. They would not kill, they only would eat refuse because they didn't want to be responsible initially for the death of the animal, so they would only eat secondhand food. Well, they wore rags and they beat themselves. It was crazy to me. Now, if you're a Jainist, I'm sorry if I offended you, but I don't get it. It doesn't matter. Buddha didn't get it either, and he said we're not going to do that, and we're not going to do what I had done. Buddha had done as a young man. He was a prince, a Hindu prince who left home dissatisfied, looking for truth, as young people do, and for many years lived with merchants and the rich and the wealthy and had parties and all sorts of indulgence. And he realized that he wasn't finding his truth there, that the truth must be in the middle between the guys who were out in the streets begging and the guys who were partying their lives away in the lavish courtyards. And he thought, well, really, if you look at everyone, basically everything is a result of cause and effect. And in the Buddhist mind and in the Indian mind, you would call this karma, cause and effect. What you do has direct consequence. If you do good things flow. If you do bad things flow. And if you understand this truth, then it's easier to accept the inevitability of disease, death, decay, and emotional pain. And I know that's ironic, but that is the Buddhist approach. So they believe every intention, action, thought has a consequence, and that the energy invested in that action, thought is duplicated, mirrored by the world back to you. So that if you lead a disciplined life and have a clear mind, then you can avoid so much of the suffering that people on either end of the spectrum feel. And the calm mind comes from the disciplined life that is a path of spirituality. If you are able to follow that path and calm your mind and discipline your actions, then you may achieve self-realization. You may have heard this called nirvana. And yes, it is here's some, I'm sorry, I want to read this. Sarah Ruth Latham. As a Christian, Buddhism is not really accepted, and I never looked into it because of that. 1 year in grad school, I had to do an assignment on a different religion. I chose Buddhism. Learning about it healed me in so many ways. It is a truly calm practice. I'm still a Christian, as am I, but I have adopted some of the practices. That's lovely. I'm so glad you shared that. Thank you. I love that. And that's where I want to get maybe some other folks today. And I'm not trying to proselytize. I'm an Episcopal, not a Buddhist. But I do think that, as Sarah Ruth says, that there are some truths here that have stood the test of time that may help one of you or two of you. Now, the Buddha had a fairly involved set of instructions for how to achieve self-realization and release from pain and suffering. And these are contained in the Four Noble Truths. Okay, the Four Noble Truths. Number one, life is suffering. Pain is inevitable. And I think if you think about this, I think you know it's true. At least it seems true to me. Attachment causes suffering. An attempt to derive happiness from things results in suffering because things are not permanent. And this would hold true for things like ideas, for things like titles, for things like laws. So all of these things are attachments. All of these things define and inform who we are, the way people look at us, the way we see ourselves, who we think we are, what we do. Is that who we are? All of those things are attachments. And those are what cause our suffering. Now, we can cure our suffering. There's a way. And that is to free yourself from these attachments, and not simply from material desires, but from the desires for yourself, for your hopes, your fears, your expectations. Letting those go shows you the middle way and your real self. Now, in order to get to number 4 is the Eightfold Path. These are 8 practices that lead one who has the knowledge of the first 3. And the practical ways to end suffering are right view, right intention, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, and right mindfulness. And they are, in the Buddha's mind, in that order. Right view leads to right intention. Right intention leads to right speech. Right speech leads to right action. And really all these are is you're letting, right view is letting go of your expectations and your fears. Letting go of your fears. And then intention is the straightforward way that you are allowed then to act without fear and without hope and without expectation, without desire. Action follows speech. Livelihood follows action. And essentially the Buddha said, let us not do something which harms another. Let our livelihood not harm us. Let us not hate what we do, but let us enjoy what we do and let it bring some joy, healing, or something to the world around us. That's right livelihood. Right effort is simply that once you've managed right view, right intention, right speech, and right action, and right livelihood, right effort is without struggle. All of these things come easily to you. Moving through the world comes easily to you. And then comes right concentration. Right concentration is simple. It's being in the present moment. It's being present. That's a Western word, isn't it? We want to be present for one another. And then mindfulness. Mindfulness is something that I think Buddhists in every iteration try to practice all the time. And mindfulness is very simply, again, being in the present moment and making note of every detail of that experience, if that makes sense. In other words, you're fully engaged and you're there in the moment, present. That is the very high-flying view 101 of Buddhism, and there's certainly much more to know, and I would encourage you, if any of this interests you, to seek it on yourself. Seek information yourself, I should say. So why is this important? Well, it's important because the way that we're beginning to look since 1967 at hospice, at death and dying in the Western world is very much like they've always looked at it in the Eastern world, without naming it hospice or without necessarily providing a benefit for it. It's a practice, it's a ritual, it's presence, it's engagement. So Vihara movement, Vihara means temple in Japan. So that is a movement that is somewhat new. Although there have always been temples, there haven't always been hospice patients in them. Now there are. And again, that speaks to the sacred space for the transition of life. So Buddhism points to an understanding of the significance of death as essential in understanding the meaning of life. So to understand, to know, to accept and embrace death is to embrace life. One of the Buddha's nicknames was the great physician. And it is not because he was, a clinician in any way. It's that his teaching was that dis-ease is caused by suffering and desire. And so he felt that if one could cure oneself of this suffering, that one could put one's body and mind more in alignment and have greater health. And I'll tell you, if you look at photographs of monks in Tibet they look like they're 1,000 years old. And I'm sure they might be. They're definitely 100. Here's the thing that sort of informs, I guess, hospice, which is it's the Buddhist duty not to harm. I mentioned this moments ago. Not to harm. That's called ahimsa in Buddhism. And what it does is it informs us about doing no harm, performing no curative action on someone who is in a dying process, asking nothing of someone in that process, not to cure aggressively. Now, to embrace death, you have to understand that in Tibet, the significance of the moment of death is very important. And not just in Tibet, but in any nation or any informed practice of Buddhism. But Tibet is to Buddhism what Mecca is to Islam, in my mind. The significance of the moment of death is predicated on the assumption that the last thought and emotion individuals have at the moment of death has an extremely powerful determining effect on their immediate future, their rebirth into a new life. Now, this is where Sarah Ruth and I and others may take pause and say, we don't know that we believe in rebirth, but let's just replace the language and put it in language we can understand. Let's talk heaven, okay? Because I won't say it's the same. I won't collude those two religions, but I will say it's a word that is more comfortable for us, and for our purposes, that's what we're trying to seek is comfort. So in Tibet, the day of death is highly, highly important, as I mentioned. And once the death of the body has taken place, what remains, the personality, or what we might call in the West the spirit, in the Tibetan eyes, remains in trance for 4 days post-death. And at the conclusion of this trance, the person begins to see a bright and expanding and brilliant light. And at this moment, the person may either flee or walk into the light. Those who walk into the light need not be reborn. Those who flee will be. And that is part of the Buddhist amalgamation of the Hindu notion of karma and rebirth. So Buddhism certainly owes Hinduism a favor in the same way that Christianity owes Judaism a favor. The original text and practice predated, that religion. But nonetheless, the interesting thing that happens in Tibet during these 4 days is that the priest read from a book, an age-old, 2,500, 3,000-year-old book called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And in that, there are very clear explanations for what is happening at that moment to the recently deceased and what will happen. And it contains warnings and guideposts. And these are part of what are chanted as the person lays dying. The notion is to shepherd them through each moment of that process, much like we learned last week, in the inpatient unit in China, the nurse has a bed in the room and is expected not to leave. So similarly in Tibet, the monks attend to the dead body for days, chanting and reading from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And then if the person flees, then at that moment, upon seeing the light, they flee, they realize they are dead. Now, each of these little periods between death are called bardos. And bardo simply means the period of time between death. So there's the first bardo, which we've discussed. And now the second bardo is when someone becomes aware that they're dead. And then their life passes before their eyes. Every moment, every detail, every word, every thought, every action. Do you see the connection? If you connect and have right thought and right action when you are living, then when you see it played back, okay, think about it. And it also calls for being engaged and present in those moments. They're coming back to you. Once this person realizes and experiences all of these memories, I guess you would say they are, they begin to long for a body. And in the Tibetan tradition, in the Buddhist tradition, they long for a body and begin to seek new parents. And I kind of like that idea that we sought our parents out, that whatever needs that we may have to resolve in this life, we came here with them and we thought the right upbringing for us, or the right parentage at least, to help us somehow deal with what was to come. I love the idea of choosing our parents. Of course, I have no memory of it, but it's an interesting idea. And it's one of the things that Buddhism just does. It just makes you think, well, gosh, what about that? And what does that mean? And what would that look like? Now, that's what I love about other religions. And what I particularly love about this one, and I've studied some others, but this one I do think has an application. And again, it has application in the hospice doula practice and the Zen hospice practice that are part of Western hospice tradition now. So this picture is Sogyal Rinpoche as a child. He, in 1992, after having met Dr. Kubler-Ross, who we talked about earlier, he wrote the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, which is a rewrite of the original Tibetan Book of the Dead. But he restructured it in some ways and shortened it considerably. But he did so because he, like Henry Fursko Weiss, had found something and he thought he wanted to share it with other people. And after talking with Dr. Kubler-Ross, he realized that the Tibetan practices around the dying could be laying over the hospice approach in America and in the West, and that these two could meld, right? And not only that, but that in America, we can begin having again that discussion, like under Kubler-Ross, about death and dying, and begin to heal ourselves. Because really, in the Buddhist sense, this is critical, it's seminal. Understanding and accepting death is seminal to the Buddhist philosophy, and it's seminal in their mind to living a good life. And I think this is the meeting point, really, between the two traditions. So here's for those of you who are able to see the presentation, here is the cover of the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. It hasn't changed since I bought my copy in 1992. And it's a good read. It is very deep. It takes a minute, but the book explores the messages of impermanence, which we have not really addressed simply because we don't have time. Evolution, karma, and rebirth, the nature of the mind and how to train the mind. So again, Eightfold Path type stuff, Four Noble Truths. Through meditation is how we train the mind, and this is very important to the book itself. It prescribes how to follow a path of spirituality and really meditation. And that's what I'm hoping we touch on today, and how to care and show love for the dying. And really the last, at least third of the book is totally devoted to care for the dying. And so any of you who work in the hospice field, I would highly recommend this book. And what Rinpoche said, and I mentioned this, that Rinpoche simply means teacher. It's an honorific in a sense, like coach or doctor. So Sogyal Rinpoche is a very respected teacher. Now, to be a teacher, you clearly have to be an enlightened one. You have to have achieved nirvana or self-realization. And just so you know, everyone who does achieve self-realization or nirvana is themselves Buddha. Buddha is not one person, although he is an historical figure. Buddha is more of a zeitgeist or a common mind, let's say. So men and women who reach realization become Buddhas, and they may have titles and honorifics around that. And in this case, Rinpoche is Sogyal Rinpoche's honorific. But what he helped for the book, the same thing that that Frisco Weiss hoped, which was to change the way, and the same thing that B.J. Miller with Zen Hospice Project looks, which is to change the way we look at death and dying in America and in the West. And when we realize that we will then be more apt and able to care for the living. And he says, when we are at last freed from the body that has defined and dominated our understanding of ourselves for so long, there's a gap or a space that is fertile with vast possibility. This is the bardo. It is a moment of tremendous pregnant power, where the only thing that matters or could matter is exactly how our mind is. Think about the moment of death. How is the mind? Stripped of a physical body, mind stands naked, revealed startlingly for what it has always been, the architect of our reality. That's a powerful thing. That's self-realization. And that leads us into how do we get there? Well, we're going to talk about meditation, and we're going to learn to meditate. And I am no master. I certainly would not begin to suggest that I'm even qualified to lead you through a meditation, but I do it, and I'll try it, and hopefully you'll have a positive experience, and if nothing else, a unique experience. So, meditation is not folks with mandalas and chants and smoke, although it can be. In fact, it can be the smoke of an airline engine. It can be the smoke of a car engine. It can be the din of a marching band. You can meditate anywhere. There's nothing that you need to meditate except yourself and your breath. It's an investment, but it doesn't cost you any money. It costs you time, and it costs you giving up your fear of what might happen if you do it. And it isn't easy. It's not easy for anyone, even the Buddha. But it's available to everyone. And you don't have to change yourself to meditate. You don't have to be a different person. You don't have to declare yourself a Buddhist. You don't have to wear orange robes. You don't have to even tell anyone. It's simple. It's easy. You can do it in silence while you're in the middle of a conversation with someone. And you don't have to be good at it. In the same way that, you don't have to be a professional athlete to get good out of lifting weights. You don't have to be a monk to get something from meditation. Everyone gets something from meditation. So, if you're like me, you're sitting down in a chair. Sit comfortably, sit erect, put your feet flat on the floor. Put your hands somehow comfortable. Fold them in your lap, drop them in your lap, palms up, however it is that they're comfortable. Sit erect, but don't strain. Don't lean. We're not trying to win a posture contest. We simply want to be able to be open to breathe fully. Now, we're going to start meditating. Our feet are flat on the ground. Our hands are loose at our side. We're going to close our eyes. I want you to say to yourself, may I be truly happy and free from suffering. Close your eyes, feet on the ground. May I truly be happy and free from suffering. A moment's reflection will show you that you can't find happiness in the past or in the future. Our memory of the past is distorted, and we have no knowledge of the future. It is blank. The only place we can find this happiness is now, here. We're going to do the meditation that the Buddha himself taught. It is the simplest of all meditations. It requires nothing of us, not focusing on anything, not holding anything, not chanting anything. We're simply breathing. It's the awareness of our breath. As you sit with your feet flat on the ground, breathing normally, naturally, calmly, breathing in and breathing out in a natural rhythm. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. We feel the rush of air at the tip of our nostril as it goes into our body. And we feel it again as it leaves our body. And we focus on that place where the outer world meets our inner world. We focus on the feeling of the breath entering our body and leaving our body. Rushing against the tips of our nostrils and flowing out past the tips of our nostrils. We focus on our breath, breathing in through the nose, breathing out through the nose, feeling our breath enter our bodies. Any thoughts that arise, we let go instantly. We constantly bring our mind back to our breathing. Breathing in through our nose, feeling the air rushing in. Breathing out through our nose, feeling the air flowing out. Breathing in, breathing out. Aware of our breathing, aware of our nose. We begin to chase our breath past the tip of our nostril and deeper into our nose and out. Begin to chase our breath as we breathe in, breathe out naturally, calmly. You see how far in our body we can feel the air moving as it flows in. We try to feel that same sensation in the body as it flows out. We focus on our breathing, chasing our breath through our body, in and out, feeling the breath, not imagining, feeling the breath, in and out. Don't you notice that there are particular moments when you are naturally inspired? Work with these moments gently. These are the moments you go through a powerful experience and your whole worldview can change. Chasing our breath in through our nose, out through our nose, focused on our breath. Don't worry about anything. Even if you find your attention wandering, there is no particular thing you have to hold on to. Just let go and drift in the awareness of your breathing. In through the nose, out through the nose. The secret is not to think about thoughts, but to allow them to flow through the mind while keeping your mind free of afterthoughts. Whenever you find yourself thinking, let that thought arise and settle without any constraint. Don't grasp at your thought. Don't feed it. Don't indulge it. Don't cling to it or try to solidify it. Focus on your breathing. Feel the air move in and out of your body. Chase your breath, always bringing back your awareness to your breathing. What we have to learn in both meditation and life is to be free of attachment. to the good experiences and free of aversion to the negative ones. We focus on our breathing. We know there is only one law in the universe that never changes, that all things change, and that all things are impermanent, like the thoughts that arise, float away. Breathing in through your nose, chasing your breath through your body, nourishing your spirit. Breathing out through the nose. What is born will die. What has been gathered will be dispersed. What has been accumulated will be exhausted. What has been built up will collapse. And what has been high will be brought low. In the sky in front of you, as you focus on your breathing with your eyes closed, in front of you, invoke the embodiment of your truth, whatever truth you believe in. Invoke the form of embodiment, and invoke the embodiment of your truth in the form of radiant light. Breathing in your nose, chasing the air through your body, feeling it heal you, feeling the toxins release when you breathe out, chasing your breath through your body. You focus your mind, your heart, and your soul on the presence you invoked, your truth, and you pray. Breathing in, breathing out. Pray to the embodiment of truth in front of you. And now you imagine that the light in front of you, the embodiment of your truth, is so moved by your prayer, it sends you love and compassion in a stream of light, and another stream of light, and another stream of light. And you begin to see and feel that you are totally immersed in light, totally enveloped in light. As you breathe in, chase your breath through your body and out your nose. You are now completely purified and completely healed by the light streaming from the presence you invoked in front of you, the embodiment of truth. Now, as you breathe in through your nose and chase your breath and breathe out. Now consider that your very body dissolves into the light that is streaming to you from the presence of truth you have invoked. As you breathe in through your nose, calmly, the body of light that you are soars into the sky and merges inseparably with the light of the heavens. Remain in this state for another minute. Breathing in through your nose, breathing out through your nose, chasing your breath. You can do this anytime, anywhere. Breathing in, breathing out, chasing your breath through your body, feeling its healing power, feeling its life. Breathing in through the nose, and out through the nose. And now we open our eyes. I hope you're relaxed. I hope you see the connection we tried to make between the East and West and hospice, and the unifying factor in this case, which is Buddhism and meditation. I hope that was interesting or enjoyable for you. Our CU code word is Bardo, and I forgot to mention it. Bardo, you remember, is the space, the pregnant space, the powerful space at the moment of death, before the next moment. Bardo, capital B-A-R-D-O. This is the password for SurveyMonkey. Bardo. You'll receive your certificate of completion tonight or tomorrow. Please finish SurveyMonkey by 5. Try and answer all questions if you will. It's helpful to us. Include your email and make sure double check your spelling. Sometimes these bounce. And our address again for SurveyMonkey is https://www.surveymonkey.com/r/8 uppercase FQ9XZJ. Please go to SurveyMonkey before 5 and complete your evaluation. I'll get your certificates out. Some people have completed the survey and some people say it's not working. So let me address that. I'll do that as soon as we conclude this call. Does anyone have any other questions other than questions around the survey, the address, or anything at all? Someone put a G instead of a 9, I think. Okay, https://www.surveymonkey.com/r/8 uppercase FQ9, not G, but 9 uppercase X, Z, and J. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be back on March 17th with self-talk, self-care, which I think will be a nice segue from meditation. Perhaps the two will blend a little bit. Thank you for listening in. Please do share these invitations with your colleagues and cohorts, your work friends, or other clinicians you know. We'd love to have as many nurses and social workers on here as possible, just so that we know that we're fulfilling the need that we want to fill, which is providing a resource for as many people as we can. And you do need a password, Melissa. That's Bardo, B-A-R-D-O. Yes, ma'am. Is everyone able to get in the survey now? Is that working for y'all? Thank you, Tammy. Alexis says, yes, it's working. Thank you, Alexis. Thank you for being here, everyone. And thank you for your comments. And, again, if you have ideas for presentations, really everything we're doing this week, with the exception of today, or this month rather, are suggestions from y'all. And so if you continue to feed me those, I'll continue to research for you and bring to you what I discover so that you can do further, deeper research on your own and in topics where you find that you have an interest. And otherwise, you will have the great benefit of having contact hours for renewal. So, let us know what you'd like to see. We'd love to create something for you. And as always, I thank you for your attention today, for your referrals, most assuredly. And please continue to refer us when you have families who have need, who are in, question what is the next step for them in their trajectory with their loved one who's in the hospital or in the nursing home or at home but had a fall. These are all people we can help. We're happy to talk to people. We're free, and we do a lot of talking for free, as you know. So we love to help anybody that we can. Please do send them to us. My name is Sean Barnes. My email is sbarnes with an ES @carepatrol.com. And my cell phone, if you need me to send you a link, is 205-482-8759. Thank y'all so much for participating today. We're going to stop now and look forward, hopefully, to seeing you on March 17th. Thank y'all. Well, how do you stop?